Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, today I wanted to talk about panic attacks. I have actually been having a few conversations with clients about this recently, and it's made me think quite a lot about my own experience. I know that feeling very well because I used to experience panic attacks quite regularly. And you may wonder, what does a panic attack actually feel like? Is essentially a very strong activation of the body's threat response. So your nervous system suddenly goes into a state of something is wrong and I need to protect myself. And this can create very intense physical sensations. Your heart might start racing. You might feel like you can't breathe properly. You can also feel dizzy, lightheaded, shaky, your body temperature changes, so you may feel hot or cold or sweaty. You might feel tingling or numbness. You might feel disconnected from yourself and from your surroundings. And very often there's this overwhelming feeling that something terrible is about to happen, even though objectively you might actually be completely safe. And that's one of the hardest things about panic. The sensations themselves can become frightening. You notice your heart racing, you become frightened by that, and then your nervous system becomes even more activated, your breathing changes, you notice more bodily sensations, and you can become even more frightened by that. And suddenly you are in this panic spiral. So I wonder if you can relate to that, if you have ever experienced something similar. And for many people, panic attacks are connected to trauma. When we've experienced something overwhelming or threatening, our nervous system can sometimes become more sensitive to cues associated with danger. It's almost as though the nervous system learns danger can happen and I need to be ready. And sometimes it can start reacting very quickly, even when we are actually safe in the present moment. The trigger doesn't necessarily have to be a conscious memory of what happened. It could be a particular situation, it could be feeling trapped or feeling that you can't escape, someone raising their voice, it could be a trigger, or a particular smell or sound as well. And also your physical sensations in your own body, they can also trigger that too. For example, if your heart starts beating faster and your nervous system recognizes that sensation as something dangerous, you might consciously know that you are okay and you're not in danger, but your body is already responding as if there is a threat. And that can contribute to the panic cycle. And of course, that doesn't mean that every panic attack is caused by trauma. And I don't think it's helpful to assume that every physical symptom is a trauma response. But understanding that our past experiences can influence how sensitive our nervous system becomes to perceived danger can be really helpful. And this is something I can really relate to from my own experience. One of the strongest feelings I remember was being trapped. I would often get panicky on public transport, particularly on the underground where there were lots of people and I felt there was no way to escape. And I experienced it on busy streets, on airplanes, and in other situations where I felt like I couldn't simply leave and I wanted to escape. And the more desperately I tried to get away from the sensations, the more frightening they became. And looking back, I can see how powerful that fight or flight response was for me. My body was essentially saying, something is wrong and I need to get out of here as soon as possible. And when I couldn't escape the sensations, the fear could become even stronger. And I think breathing is worth talking about because it can be a big part of what happens during a panic attack. When we get into a panic attack, we often start to hyperventilate. So our breathing can become faster and sometimes shallower, and we can end up breathing more than our body actually needs. And this means we are blowing off too much carbon dioxide or CO2. And that drop in CO2 can contribute to some of the sensations we experience, things like dizziness, tingling, you may feel lightheaded, or feeling that we can't get enough air. And you may have heard about breathing into a paper bag to breathe some of that CO2 back in. And this is not something I would recommend because it isn't necessarily safe, particularly if we don't know what's causing someone's breathing difficulties. But I do want to mention breathing because I think it is important. So, learning to slow down your breathing and using gentle diaphragmatic breathing can help to reduce overbreathing and can help your body settle. However, I also wanted to be realistic about this. When you are deep into a heightened fear and anxiety spiral, breathing may help, but it may not be enough to stop the panic immediately. I've worked with people for whom breathing techniques have been really useful, and I've also worked with people who found that in the middle of intense panic, focusing on their breathing didn't make much difference, or sometimes actually it made things worse. And that's actually part of what I learned myself. Sometimes we need to look beyond what is happening during the panic attack and start asking what has happening or what was happening before I got there. And if you are experiencing new, severe, or unexplained breathing difficulties or other unusual symptoms, please don't automatically assume it's panic. It's important to get it checked. But the turning point for me was when I started looking at my panic attacks differently. And instead of only asking, how do I stop this from happening? I started asking, what has been happening in my body and my life before this happened? And I noticed something. And it wasn't usually one single thing, it was often an accumulation. I might have been exhausted, I hadn't eaten properly, I was dehydrated, or I had been under stress for a long time. Sometimes I had been drinking too much coffee or having too much sugar, and I wasn't giving myself enough time to recover. And sometimes there was emotional stress that I hadn't really acknowledged. It was almost like my nervous system had been carrying more and more until eventually the glass was full. And then something relatively small could be that thing that made it overflow. So imagine your nervous system as like a glass. Poor sleep adds a little bit, chronic stress adds a little bit, not enough food or not the right foods adds a little bit, dehydration or too much caffeine, emotional stress, all of that add a little bit. And if we have experienced trauma, our nervous system may also have learned to respond more quickly to certain signals of danger. And then life keeps adding to it. And maybe you're coping perfectly well until suddenly the glass overflows. And then we look at that thing that happened immediately before the panic attack and think that's what caused it. But perhaps that was just the final drop. There may already have been much more contributing to that overall load than we realized. And this is where a really important shift happened for me. I stopped looking for one magical solution and I started looking at myself more holistically. How am I sleeping? What am I eating? Am I hydrated? How much caffeine am I having? How long have I been under pressure? How long have I been spending in recovery and rest? What's happening emotionally for me? And perhaps most importantly, what is my body trying to tell me before it reaches the point of panic. Because eventually I'll learn to notice the much more subtle signs, the little changes in my body, the feeling that I was becoming more activated or I was becoming more disconnected, the tension, the restlessness, the urge to escape as well. And instead of waiting until I was already in a full panic attack, I learned to respond much earlier. But I want to make one thing really clear, that I'm not saying that you need to control every aspect of your life perfectly in order to prevent panic. That can actually create another layer of fear. For me, this wasn't about becoming afraid of coffee or busy places or ever physical sensation. It was about becoming more aware of my body and less afraid of what I was feeling. And that distinction was really important for me. And I haven't experienced a panic attack for several years now. And I don't say that because I found one magical technique that made panic disappear. For me, it was learning to understand my nervous system, learning to recognize the signs earlier, and taking care of myself on different levels. Yes, physically, yes, emotionally, and yes, mentally. And if you experience panic attacks, I really want you to understand that you are not broken. Your body isn't fighting against you, it's not your enemy. It's trying to actually protect you. And sometimes it may be responding to something happening right now. Sometimes it may be influenced by what you've experienced in the past. And sometimes it may simply be responding to a period of prolonged stress, exhaustion, or other demands on your body. But your body is also incredibly adaptable. Remember that your nervous system can learn. It can learn new patterns. It can learn that you don't always have to run or run away from things. It can learn that a racing heart doesn't necessarily always mean danger. It can also learn that you can feel a sensation without being consumed by it. And you can also learn to recognize those early signals and respond to yourself with compassion rather than fear. And that's what happened for me. I went from being frightened of panic to becoming curious about what my body was trying to tell me. And that changed everything for me. So if you're listening to this because you've been struggling with panic recently, I want you to know that where you are today doesn't have to be where you stay. And you don't have to figure everything out today. You don't need to fix yourself. You can start small. You can start by becoming curious about your body rather than frightened by it. There's so much you can learn about yourself, and there are many ways you can support your nervous system. And little by little, you can begin to build a relationship with your body based not on fear, but on trust, safety, compassion. And you don't have to fight your body. You can learn to work with it. And perhaps that's one of the most empowering things I've learned, that my body isn't working against me. It's communicating with me. And when you learn to listen, you may discover that what once felt like your greatest weakness can actually become a doorway into knowing yourself much more deeply. And that's for me a very helpful place to arrive. So I would love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a panic attack? And if you have, what helped you cope with it? Let me know in the comments. And if this video resonated with you, please leave a like, subscribe to this channel, or share it with someone who might benefit from hearing this message. My intention with these videos is to keep sharing things that I hope can inspire and support you, while also sharing some of my own lived experience along the way. And in my next video, I'm going to share something I do regularly to help signal safety to my nervous system. Not when I'm already in panic, but as a part of my everyday life. because sometimes the best time to teach your nervous system that you're safe is before you need it. And I hope you will join me for that.